Aside from COVID, another pandemic has been born. A pandemic of class, of callous indifference, and of striking and disparate inequality. Homelessness has risen exponentially in recent years in nations of both the global north and south, leaving millions in the streets with no permanent structure to call home. In Sacramento alone, the capital of the world's fifth largest economy, estimates of those experiencing homelessness increased by over 11,000 annually, with the latest numbers reflecting the impacts of COVID yet to come. In approaching this project, we wanted to answer the question of how might we reduce the callousness towards the homeless and the housing precarious. This video will take you through our process of approaching that question.
Class in the United States is a complex construct and is often used interchangeably with socioeconomic status to define and situate a person within the social hierarchy. A person's location in this hierarchy is based on a number of factors, including the various intersections of their personal identity, their education, family, location, and it determines their access to resources and opportunities. Though they may have their differences, they share one key determinant: wealth. For the vast majority of Americans, wealth comes from earned income, from wages. Unfortunately, for the past 4 decades, about 90% of the country has been experiencing wage stagnation, meaning that their real wage, after adjusting for inflation, holds the same purchasing power as it did 40 years ago. However, the cost of living has continually increased. So what led to this wage stagnation, the limitations to the typical American worker's income? One of the greatest impacts has been the shift to the policies of neoliberalism, embracing free market capitalism, deregulation, privatization, and austerity measures. This governmental hands-off policy allowed businesses leeway to rewrite their approach, leading to the suppression of wages, even as companies' profits increased. All the while, those in leadership positions of corporations received staggering increases to their own incomes. While wages stagnated, including the national minimum wage, the cost of living increased, presenting a gap between the minimum wage and the living wage. This discrepancy is apparent in the statistics of Californians living in poverty, with more than 34% of the state residents being categorized as poor or near poor in 2019, even though the state has the highest minimum wage in the country. California has experienced a concentration of the population within its urban centers. With more wages and opportunities in these areas, the demand for housing grew, leading to rising costs. With the price of housing increasing while wages remained stagnant, the lower 90% of the socioeconomic ladder felt the squeeze in an unprecedented way. The culmination of these economic factors, wage stagnation, the increased cost of living, and the austerity policies of the neoliberal governments, the results of homelessness and housing precarity are not surprising. Though people tend to blame individuals experiencing housing insecurity, believing that this is their own doing, homelessness and housing precarity demonstrate the failures of our institutions to protect its citizens. One of the most devastating policies of neoliberalism has been the war against the welfare state, which provides those in need with resources to survive. The removal of this support allows people to fall through the cracks. The price of living in California, particularly the cost of rent, has increased dramatically. Even with a full-time job and a 2-income household, that might not be enough for people to have housing security. Rent is normally supposed to account for no more than 30% of your income. Yet, a 2015 study found that almost 30% of California renters say that they spend at least 50% of their income on rent. Per a study by the National Low Income Housing Organization, it would take a person making an hourly wage of $68.33, more than 4 times the current minimum wage of $16.32, to comfortably afford a 2-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. In an article from Vox addressing homelessness in San Francisco and the shifts in people experiencing housing precarity, quote, where the city once counted the unemployed, addicts, and the mentally ill as its primary homeless population, an increasing number of working San Franciscans and their families are joining the homeless shelter waiting lists and dining room lines. They're people with jobs. They're people who work full-time and still can't afford to live in the city. End quote. Though there can be different economic factors that contribute to why somebody experiences hardships that lead to housing precarity, the common denominator is the economic policies that have benefited the interests of the wealthy over those of the average American. Without adequate support, regulation of affordable housing, and resources from the government, people are left to rely on community support. The problem is systemic and complex, not the faults of individuals alone. It might only take a little bit of bad luck, the loss of a job, a breakup, an expensive trip to the hospital, to jeopardize a person already on the cusp of falling through the cracks.
The United Nations in 1999 interpreted homeless as including those sleeping without shelter in constructions not meant for habitation and in welfare institutions. The picture shown now is a poster of a Bollywood movie which was released back in 1974. The phrase Roti Kapda aur Makan was coined by the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi before the elections of 1967, which means food, clothes, and shelter. Another picture is from Ghar Bachao Ghar Banao Andolan that started in 2004 after the demolition of a slum in Mumbai. It talked about the rights of Dalit, minorities, and women. The whole movement was to fight for development with justice and equity. The reason for bringing this here is to make everyone understand that shelter is not a new problem in India. It has been a political issue for past 6 to 7 decades, a problem that generations of people have been trapped in. Though homelessness as an issue in India persists over decades, and though it has gained political traction at times, the issue hasn't been addressed the way it should have been. Election manifestos by different parties would promise permanent housing for so and so population every 5 years, but the reality is far away from those promises. The lockdown crisis and COVID 19 in India highlighted various issues. One of them was being homeless. When the whole country was asked to stay at homes, there was a significant part of population that had no place to live. There are a whole lot of problems that exist in India related to homelessness and people experiencing housing precarity in India. Dominant patriarchy, violence, and other crimes against women that pushes women to go out of their houses. Hierarchical caste system, discrimination, and intergenerational poverty cycle. Uneven wealth distribution, rich getting richer and poor getting poorer. Eviction drives, no affordable housing and displacement. No proper amenities in the slums or the temporary shelter where they are living. Unemployment, unorganized jobs, and job insecurity. And all these factors contribute towards making people more vulnerable and live without a shelter. We are looking for a two-way solution for the problem, which includes policy advocacy and providing affordable housing. And the other one is to uplift people from the bottom of the pyramid to reach the threshold where they themselves are able to get a shelter on their own. Some of the proposed solutions are women empowerment so as to make it a safer space for women and get financially independent, custom made housing according to the community's need in case of eviction, affordable housing schemes, climate resilient houses, and secure employment to the people. The broader solution that may take few years or even decades to change. Let's look into some immediate solutions that we are proposing. One of the solutions that we are proposing is to rope in organizations, NGOs, reality firms, etc., to get the places on lease or on donation for a period of time. And then we'll be making makeshift houses that are movable and we'll try to set up a community or a private shelter for the homeless. The outcome of this program would be to provide immediate help to the people who are suffering from different climatic conditions because of harsh climates such as rain, heat waves, cold winter, or people who cannot afford to rent a place in the urban parts of India and elsewhere. Second solution is to rope in the skill enhancing institutes and job providers so that people are able to get a dignified job. They are able to earn their livelihoods and better their livelihood.
The solutions to be found in the U.S. are patchwork, incomplete, and in the best of times, bogged down by red tape and neighborhood pushback. Looking to the so-called top-down approach, the state has implemented a homeless coordination department as a subset of the Department of Community Response. This governmental body has, in following with budgetary and policy plans, done work to open up safe shelter spaces for the housing precarious in what could be considered as a case study in the state capital. Following reports from Cap Radio, we went to check out the areas that had once been these safe shelter spaces, now generally accepted as shuttered, abandoned by the very same department that sought to keep these spaces safe. The streets where there had once been designated safe shelter space had been cleaned, but a quick walk across the street revealed that most who had taken camp in the designated zone had simply shifted a block down the street to where they were less likely to be bothered by authorities. Sacramento claims 42% of residents served at these safe grounds moved on to some type of shelter or housing, yet those afflicted tell a different story. Laura Nussbaum, a former bookkeeper currently struggling with homelessness, said of these attempts by the state, quote, "After so many times of people coming down and saying they're going to help and then not showing up ever again, I realize that I have to do it myself." Coming from a more ground-up approach, nonprofit organizations have been doing work to fill in the gaps left behind by policymakers in the state. Project Homeless Connect is one of many such organizations whose focus is in providing resources to the unhoused that they may not otherwise be able to access, such as health and medical services, job training, help in securing housing and housing advocacy, as well as attaining state identification. From their website, quote, "We use tailored case advocacy and support to help people remove barriers and solve problems related to housing, employment, and health." Another organization that helps provide custom housing support is Swords to Plowshare, founded by military veterans specifically for veterans. Their services include programs tailored towards eviction prevention, emergency or temporary housing, permanent supportive households, rent support, counseling, and case management. Organizations like Project Homeless Connect and Swords to Plowshare demonstrate how holistic approaches, considering the various struggles within an individual's life, can provide substantial and lasting solutions. With or without larger systemic changes, local organizations providing essential services to those experiencing housing precarity and homelessness are only able to work within the confines of the system that both constricts their ability and the ability of the unhoused to access resources. Going back to the previous metaphor, they're patchwork solutions over a systemically hole-filled umbrella. And following with this, here's an interview we conducted with a person and their family currently experiencing homelessness in India. We hope by ending with their story that we may look for a path forward and a final word from the most invested in this additional pandemic, the unhoused themselves.
ये रहा घर। अच्छा, ये आपका घर? हाँ, इसमें तखत पड़े हुए हैं और बाल्टी साल्टी पानी पीने के लिए, बर्तन है खाने बनाने के लिए।
और आप लोग शौच के लिए कहाँ पे जाते हैं? बाहर ही जाते हैं?
हाँ, बाहर ही जाना पड़ता है।
मान लीजिए रात में अगर किसी को जाना है तो तब तो प्रॉब्लम
अब हाँ, प्रॉब्लम तो होता है कि जैसे रात में है तो इस टंकी के पीछे चले गए महिला।
अच्छा,
शौचालय कहाँ जहाँ आस पास है वो उसमें चले गए और तो बेकार न लगाना, अब नहीं लाना पड़ेगा, गर्मी आ जाए।
नहीं पकाते हैं, नहीं खाते हैं।
लकड़ी से जलाते हैं?
हाँ।
अच्छा, चूल्हा आपने बनाया क्या?
हाँ।
ओह,
यहीं डाल लाई था पानी, यहीं बैठ कर नहाइए, कपड़ा अंदर बदल ली।
तो जैसे मजदूरी हम लोग करते हैं, अब अपना देश छोड़ के अब यहाँ पड़े हैं कमाने खाने के लिए।
अच्छा, आप कहाँ से आए हैं?
बहराइच से।
तो आप कब यहाँ पे आए थे?
हमें हो गया 4 साल हो गया।
4 साल हो गए। तब से आप यहीं पे रह रहे हैं?
हाँ।
ये फ्लाईओवर के नीचे ही?
हाँ, यहीं के नीचे रह रहे हैं।
अच्छा, और आपके फैमिली में कौन कौन है?
2 बच्चे हैं, एक ये लड़का रहा, एक लड़की है और एक बीवी गई है वो।
आपने कभी सोचा नहीं कि आप किसी पक्के मकान में जैसे किराए पे ले ले, ऐसा कुछ करके?
भाई इनकम नहीं है,
इनकम नहीं है
ऐसी कि हम 3,000-3,500 कैसे देंगे उनको।
हाँ, सही।
हम जैसे आज हमारी छुट्टी हो गई
हाँ,
और मकान मालिक तो ये नहीं जानेगा कि आपकी छुट्टी हो गई, वो तो जब महीना पूरा होगा उसको पैसा चाहिए उसको। भाई पैसा नहीं आप ये महीने में तो अगले महीने में तो, लेकिन दोगे ज़रूर उसको पैसा।
उनका
और
कहने
हम ये
मतलब
सोचते हैं कि 300 में हम जाएंगे काम करने, 50 रुपये तो हमारे दोपहर में लंच में चले जाएंगे, पूड़ी सूड़ी खाएंगे तो हम गुटखा का भी खा लेंगे, 50 उसमें चले गए, बचे 250 रुपये। आते आते वो घर तक 200 रुपये ही बचे, और घर का भी खर्चा 200 रुपये का ही, तो बचा क्या।
महंगा
आवास योजना चल रही भाई, लेकिन जिसके पास जगह है उसको मिल रहा है, उसको मिल रहा है, हमारे पास जगह नहीं। वो
जैसे 2 बार बोला 50,000, तो आपके मतलब दिमाग में क्या इतना इतनी रकम है कि इतने कम से कम जुड़ जाना चाहिए? 50
जुड़ जाना चाहिए इतना पैसा, ये इतना पैसा जुड़ नहीं रहा है। क्या 50,000 रुपये जुड़ जाए तो हम कुछ ना कुछ आगे कुछ बनाएं, कुछ शायद की बात
मतलब कोई हम अपना खुद का काम
हाँ, जैसे खुद का काम।
भी हैं।
बहुत ज़्यादा हमको झेलना पड़ा ये बात के लिए कि बताओ मड़ैया में है, कैसे कैसे करके उनको बांध के अच्छे तरीके से पक्का लगा दिया कि अंदर हवा ना आए, कोहरा ना
ना
घुसे।
भैया, न्यूज वाले बहुत आ चुके हैं, ऐसा न्यूज लेके चले गए,
अच्छा
किया कुछ नहीं है।
अच्छा।
अगर ये कॉलोनी वाले ये तो है सामने वाले यही सब आके दे जाते।
चाहते हैं कि कहीं तो बन जाए मकान, आराम से रहें उसमें, और बच्चों की अपना भविष्य बनाएं, लिखा देंगे अपना वहीं पे मदरसे में या कहीं छोटे मोटे स्कूलों में अपना पढ़ते रहेंगे आराम से, 5वां 6ठा पढ़ ले बहुत। कोई सहायता देगा कि हाँ भाई हमारा प्लाट में बना लो, खाली पड़ा है। बहुत से बड़े बड़े आदमी पड़े हुए हैं, बड़े बड़े आदमी पड़े हुए हैं, प्लाट उनका पड़ा हुआ है ऐसे ही, अभी बनवा रही रहे 2-3 साल, वो खरीद कर डाल दिया है, तो बोल रहे तुम ही बना लो, साफ सुथरा करे रहोगे हमारा प्लाट, घास जंगल नहीं होगी उसमें रहोगे तो सब साफ सुथरा रहेगा। बहुत ऐसे ऐसे खाएँ
रहते हैं, कमाते खाते हैं, यहाँ कभी खाली हो जाएगा तो कहीं और ठिकाना बनाएगा। अगर सरकार जैसे हमारी मदद करे तो और अच्छी बात है।
किससे कहें, सरकार से कहें, किससे कहें, अब जैसे हैं ऊपर वाले भरोसे में पड़े रहते हैं भाई, जैसा आपने बना के भेजा है वैसे ही काट रहे हैं।